Hello, good morning.
Morning.
I have here Hazel Gale. Very excited to be talking to you this morning. But I will let you introduce yourself. What gets
Okay,
you
so
excited in the morning?
getting me excited in the morning. Well, recently, actually, I've been getting up a hell of a lot earlier than I'm used to, which has been really nice because I've been writing a book. Um, so at the moment, my job is cognitive hypnotherapist. My book is about that and about my past, my journey up to this point, which has been, well, a mix of things, really. But for the last decade and a half, I was a full-time athlete. Competed for 10 years as a fighter, first in kickboxing and then boxing. Before that, though, I was working in lots of different bars and restaurants. I got an art degree. I was a singer for a bit, so I've had a bit of a sort of motley
Fantastic.
past, all of which helps. I can think back on those things now and see how they played into where I am now. Yeah, it's not exactly linear, my journey up to this stage.
So you were never worried about how it looks on your LinkedIn page, were you?
Well, I don't think LinkedIn existed back then.
Yeah, I know. I feel that very often people stop themselves exploring and doing things that they would absolutely want to do because they're worried how it doesn't look linear anymore in their
Yeah.
CV, in their LinkedIn page. So they stop, you know, they're too worried about the CV that they can't explore.
Yeah, I would say that's something that's never affected me. If something
I
grabs me,
can see that.
if I want to do something, then I tend to do it. Yeah, and variety has been a big deal for me. I hate monotony. I don't like it when things get strung out for too long. So I'm quite happy to chop and change. And it's nice when you look back and you see the dots connecting and you see how different things play in. Especially being a therapist, you need life experience to do this job.
Yeah.
I don't think there's many therapists that just go and do their degree in psychology and then come straight out and become a therapist at 22.
Yeah.
There'll be some, and I'm not saying they wouldn't be any good, but it's easier to have got a little bit of experience under your belt first, I think.
So I'd like to know, how do you define success?
So this question, I struggled a little bit with it at first, largely because I think that striving for success is a dangerous thing to do, because I mean clearly it's very possible to be extremely successful at the same time as being extremely unhappy, and we all know that. I often think that goals like being successful or being a success are much like goals like being beautiful, or being rich or being thin. I think of them as mirage fantasies. So they're like these glimmering, shimmering illusions of our successful selves that the mind thrusts out ahead of us in order to keep us struggling forward. But they make a false promise.
Yeah.
They tell us that when I get that, I'll be okay. But they're based on a present day sense of lack. We think, well, I'm not quite good enough now, but if I just get that thing, then I'll be all right. But we get it and we still have that niggling feeling inside that says, nah, still not enough. So we discount that victory and we look for the next thing. So just like a mirage, we keep moving forward and we never get any closer. It never quenches our thirst. So yeah, that's the way I think of success. So I think really there's a really critical difference between having success and feeling successful.
Yeah.
And I think in order to feel successful, we need, yes, to have had some achievements, of course, but we need to have been present along the way, and we need to know how to look inside and actually search for the feeling that says I'm okay. Really what I'm saying is we need self-acceptance,
Yeah.
which sounds extremely obvious, but it's just such a rare thing.
It is.
So yeah, I'm not entirely sure how it defines success. If I was going to put my reservations about the word in itself to one side and use it as only a positive, I would say true success is being able to accept oneself and enjoy one's patient, one's activities at the same time as being able to, support your family and live comfortably. I think that's probably what I would call it.
That's fantastic. And the reason I want to talk about this because I want to expand the definition of success, because I think, as you said, many people, they are very stuck with that very rigid, old-fashioned definition of success, which is, beauty, riches, career, title, all of that. Nothing wrong with that. You can take those bits that are relevant for you, but not in a way, as you described, I will be happy when. But if you enjoy, designer shoes, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But it's not a it's not a proof of self-worth. And I think for women, we've adopted those symbols from outside, and then there's the constant lack because it doesn't bring the happiness that we're looking for. So that's why I always want to talk about it, because once you define it for yourself, what success means, or bigger life, what it means, then you can start actually being happy with the everyday.
Yeah.
So
now is the only place where happiness is possible, and that's the thing that these mirage fantasies fool us into thinking. I will be happy when. It's just such a lie.
Yeah.
The external internal thing is the key. We think the external stuff is going to make us happy when, of course, it can't. Happiness has to come inside.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. You probably weren't born like this. It's everybody I interview, they seem so wonderfully together and present and able to enjoy the happiness in the moment. But what I'm interested in is the backstory. It's the turning point. How did you get here? Can you share maybe one story from the past?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I definitely wasn't born like this. In fact, this has been a relatively recent shift. And one that took a fair amount of pain. So I was doing that success-seeking thing in boxing, kickboxing first, boxing afterwards. And I had my mirage had an image of me, with title belts, looking happy and feeling like I'd achieved what I was, meant to achieve. But it didn't matter what I won in that sport. I won a few titles that on paper would look impressive, but none of them ever quenched my thirst. None of them ever actually made me feel okay about myself, which meant that I kept pushing myself. And I was doing stupid amounts of training at one stage, 3 sessions a day, every day. The memory that just came to mind when you asked me about one story was something I've written about in my book. I found myself on a treadmill at the local gym at about 2 a.m. in the morning, running. And I was doing this thing where I was kind of watching the numbers and trying to make the seconds sync up with the miles. And if they didn't sync up, so I landed on the new mile exactly on a new minute, I think, well, I'll do another one. And I ended up running, I can't remember how far it was, over 10 miles at 2 a.m. in the morning in my third session when I was really tired. And in my head, I was congratulating myself for this. I was telling myself that this is exactly what I needed. This is what winners do, and I was fast on my way to burnout. Which happened shortly after that. And looking back, it's so blatantly obvious. But at the time, I was so addicted to this sense, this promise of achievement. The funny thing was that on that treadmill, that all of my instructors, all of these sort of guru guys that I was looking up to at the time who had won their world titles, there was a big picture of them all standing there proudly with their titles and these big smiles on their faces and the strong-looking bodies. And I was like, that's it. That's what I'm striving towards, almost literally on this treadmill right now. But of course, I never got to that place. I don't know if they did. It's so easy to think that other people have got it when you're looking through your own eyes.
Yes.
So yeah, my turning point was when I completely crashed, and I refused to accept it for a long time. So I was constantly coming back out and trying to do extra bits of training and pushing myself way too early, and I was up and down for a very long time. And it was the reason I'm a therapist now is because it was cognitive hypnotherapy that helped me to look inside effectively to find the real cause of the problem, which was my sense of inferiority, and to work on that instead of trying to counter it with the external things, the medals and the trophies and all the other stuff. So that was, I think, probably the point at which I realized I was really okay was only a matter of years ago. I can't pinpoint it right now, but probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I really stopped and thought, okay, yeah, actually, I've traveled this path and I've got to where I needed to be, as in terms of my feeling successful rather than having success. Yeah,
that's a very. I think a lot of people feel like that or have been through that. Maybe not on a treadmill, but it takes different forms, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's working too hard, too much, or chasing whatever I love the word mirage goal is.
Yeah.
So what would be your top tip for women who want a bigger life, want to live more authentically, want to give up this kind of chasing of the external dream of success, but not a little bit of fear how to get started? What's your top tip? How to get out there?
Well, I mean, this is cliched. My top tip for people who want to do that is to get okay with failure. That again comes back to self-acceptance. Just learn how to enjoy the journey, focus on growth, and seek growth potential in every single moment, especially the difficult ones. That's my top tip for people. My top tip for women, in addition to that, and I actually think of this almost like a duty that we all have, a responsibility that we all have, to constantly remind ourselves and compound the fact that we're as valuable as the next person. Just purely because society is not quite geared up to believe that yet. I'm not blaming any individual people or men or anything like that. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying that with the syntax at the moment, the way that the world speaks about men and women, the fact that we're even still using those categories so absolutely, it puts us in a difficult position. But we don't have to believe that stuff. But if we don't take care to constantly remind ourselves that we are worthy human beings and we're allowed to be paid as much and we're allowed to have an opinion and state it and all that stuff, then we run the risk of getting swayed by that conditioning more than necessary. So that's my top tip.
Yeah, it's the story that's been created by others, and if we don't create our own story, we'll get completely consumed. So that's exactly that. Thank you very much, and I very much look forward to welcoming you to Festival of Doers in January 26th in London. And everybody, join us and Hazel and hear Hazel's full story.
Fabulous. See you then.
See you then. Thank you.